Good morning. Great to be back here with all of you. Alex took care of the duties last week. I appreciate that. It's nice to have a counterpart to, pick up the slack whenever you're gone, and it's very blessed to have that. The past couple weeks, and Alex even talked about some of it last week in his lesson, but the past couple weeks, we've started this series on learning more about Jesus and being taught Jesus. I think as Christians, we ought to have a good grasp on Jesus. I think that helps us look more like Him when we know more about the life of Jesus and who He is. I think any Christian should want to look like Jesus, since that's who we follow. Oh, to be like Thee, right? We just sang about that. We want that. I hope so. I want to be. But last time we did talk about things that, and really what this series is about, we're trying to talk about things that we can learn about Jesus and then things that we can learn from Jesus. And we've been trying to answer those two questions as we go because, when you slow down and you look a little bit more intently at Jesus, I think there's a lot to be learned and so many different things that we can find in the person of Jesus that we can model and should model in our lives. And so one of the things that we can model from Jesus is how He handled people, even with the busy schedule that He had. And so that's really what this morning's lesson is going to be about. We're going to talk about modeling Jesus in our busyness. Modeling Jesus in our busyness. I think we're all pretty aware of the fact that we are busier, I would say, as a society today than perhaps we have ever been before. There are all kinds of reasons for that, but, we are, I would say, a schedule-filled people. We're schedule-filled people. And we are people that really fill our days sometimes with as much as we can handle until it becomes too much to handle. And also that can kind of get to be a real problem because the time that we have allotted for the things on our schedules, it may not allow. And it may not even leave much room for other things or other people. But when we look to Jesus, or when we watch Jesus operate, I think what we find is a very valuable lesson for us in that even with a busy schedule, that Jesus still made time for people. Now, let's look at that idea a little bit further. We're going to be in Mark's Gospel, Mark chapter 1. You want to turn there and follow along. But early on in Mark's Gospel, we find in chapter 1 alone, Jesus working in His ministry. Okay, it says, this was after the temptation in the wilderness, and then Mark lets us know that this was after John had actually been taken into custody. And so we find Jesus actively working in His ministry. What's He doing? He's preaching all around Galilee. He's gathering some of His first disciples, and He is in the synagogues teaching. And as He is going about doing all of that, in chapter 1 alone, there are several things that we find in there that almost kind of seem like they might be, inconveniences for Him. Because it almost seems like they put a pause on some of the main work that He is trying to do. But as He's going around preaching and teaching, you have the man in the synagogue right there at the beginning of chapter 2. You have the man in the synagogue that has an unclean spirit, in which Jesus takes the time to heal the man. After that, they all go into the house of Simon and Andrew, and Simon's mother-in-law is sick, and so they go and speak to Jesus about her. And what's He do? He raises her up. He takes her by the hand, and it says that the fever she had just left her, like it was no big deal. And then she starts waiting on them. And then that very evening, people now start bringing everybody who was demon-possessed and sick, because, hey, we heard about you healing the guy in the synagogue. We heard about maybe, you healing Simon's mother-in-law. We've got a lot more people like that. And so now what do? They start bringing everybody to Jesus. They bring all of them. In fact, the text says the whole city had gathered at the door. And so he spends the evening healing people and casting out demons. And then he goes to the neighboring towns as well to preach more. And what's he do there? He casts out more demons there. And also during all of that, that's where we read about this leper that comes seeking Jesus to be cleansed. And, well, Jesus cleansed him too. As we look at all of that, here in this chapter, I think we learn several things about Jesus and from Jesus. The first thing that we learn about Jesus is that we learn that Jesus never let his work shield him from people. This is something very valuable for us to see, because even when you look at what Jesus' real main mission was about, he says this in chapter 1, verses 37 and 38. This is after the evening of healing everybody, and then the next morning it says he got up early and he goes off and he's praying, and well, everybody's looking for him at that point, especially Simon and the rest of the guys, his companions, it says, and they're like, hey, everybody's looking for you. Where are you at? And look what Jesus says here. When they find him praying, Jesus says, let us go elsewhere to the towns nearby. Why? So that I may preach there also. For that is what I came out for. Now that's very interesting, because the highlights in the chapter are always him performing the miracles on people. But Jesus says himself that that's not really what he even came to do. He says he came to preach. And he's ready to go preach to even the neighboring towns now, because why? That's what he came to do. His ministry wasn't just to come and heal people. His ministry wasn't just to come and cast out demons. It was to teach and to preach the gospel of God. And you get that from verses 14 and 15 in chapter 1. And he's going to tell people about that gospel, that the time is fulfilled and that the kingdom of God is at hand and that they should repent and believe in that gospel. And so teaching and preaching really was his main line of work. Yet what we learn about Jesus is that he didn't let all of that work, and he didn't let the busyness of all of that work shield him from people. Now, and Russ could tell you this too, but this could easily be a point right here for preachers, couldn't it? This could easily be a point for preachers, and maybe if I was preaching to a group of preachers, I'd probably make this point. Because sometimes preachers kind of see themselves as having like this main ministry, right, of teaching and preaching the word, and they sometimes want to maybe close themselves off a little bit from everybody else. The mentality kind of goes like, look, I'm building lessons every week by week. I'm putting Bible classes together. I'm putting sermons together. I'm doing the Lord's work here, and they kind of see it as that. But sometimes what they fail to realize is that even Jesus did not let his main line of work shield him from other people. Just because he had a primary job to do didn't close him off from those who needed help or those who were sick. Now that's one thing we learn about Jesus. Now, what do we learn from Jesus? Let's try to answer the second question. Well, we learn not to see people as an inconvenience in our busy lives. This stuff isn't just for preachers, y'all. This is for everybody. This is for all Christians, because it applies across the board. Most all of us unless you're retired, and even then you might still be even busier than you were. But most all of us live very busy lives. You know, we are a busy people. We have places to be. We've got people to see. We've got schedules to keep, appointments to go to, practices to get to sometimes. We've got, phone calls that we've got to take, emails that we've got to respond to, businesses to take care of, you name it. We are a busy people. And we are really always on the go, aren't we? And by the way, there's only 24 hours in a day. And we don't have a whole lot of time to get the things that we need done, much less adding something extra to our plate. And sometimes in all of that, when things do start to seem like they are impeding on our schedules, sometimes we even have a tendency to start making excuses. And we start giving all of these reasons as to why we can't take that on, or why we can't take time for this or that. And I get it. I totally get it. Sometimes it's warranted. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you really don't have time to take those things on. But sometimes we get so busy with our work or whatever it is that we don't even have time for people that come into our lives, and we may even start viewing them as an inconvenience. I don't think I have to tell you, but that's not what we see in Jesus. The way that he went about his ministry teaches us something very different about how we should view our schedules. I mean, if you just think about it, if the Son of God can, and considering all the stuff that he had to do, if he can take time out of his main line of work and what he came to do, and if he can stop along the way and cast out a demon, and if he can, spend some time in the home of someone that he cares about and heal a loved one of theirs, and if he can, spend an entire evening dealing with person after person that is coming to him, seeking to be healed or in hopes that they might cast out a demon out of them, and if he can take the time to cleanse someone who came to him, though that's not necessarily what he came to do, then I think we ought to think very seriously about what we may allow for in our daily and weekly schedules. Because if that's what we see in the Son of God, then that's what should be true in those that follow him. I mean, right? It should be. We have to recognize and understand that Jesus was also in the people business. We have to understand that he was also in the people business. He's in the teaching and preaching business, absolutely, but he was also in the people business. He spent time with people too. He was in the lives of other people. He took time for people. He was observant with other people around him. He built relationships with people as he spent time with them. He didn't have this mindset of, I'm just going to stick to the work, and I don't really have time for all of this other stuff. I don't have time for anybody else. I'm just going to do what I came here to do. I'm not really going to spend time to help them. I'm not going to stop for them. I'm just going to stick to the schedule. What we learn is that if we're going to model Jesus, we should never allow our schedules to get so full and so busy that we never really have any meaningful interactions with other people. Or we never leave room there for a conversation to be had with someone. No time to stop and help someone if needed. No time to be a friend with a listening ear or a confidant with a shoulder to cry on. That's not the kind of person we see in Jesus. Here's something else we could think about. we should never think that being a closed-off Christian is how God would ever want us to be. You can't live Christianity the way that you're supposed to and be a closed-off person to other people. I mean, how could we ever expect to effectively minister to others if we don't make time for others? How could we expect to reach someone with the gospel if we don't even allow for those gospel conversations to happen? How could we show the love of Jesus if we don't take the opportunities to do so because our schedules won't allow it? And so you know what we have to recognize? We have to recognize that we too are in the people business. Folks, we're Christians. We're supposed to be in the business of saving souls here. People is our business. You understand that? People is our business. Every bit of our business. How could we even say that we don't have time for people when authentic Christianity is all about people? That logic doesn't even work. That doesn't follow the model we see in Jesus at all. But you know what I think happens sometimes as to maybe why people don't really have much time or they don't really make time? I think sometimes what happens is that you have people that end up compartmentalizing their Christianity. What I mean by that is that sometimes you have people that keep their Christianity totally separate from what they do during the rest of their days and the rest of their time during the week. To where it might be, only practiced or only done perhaps on Sundays, and they get to be what's called a Sunday-only Christian. And they don't really think about exercising any part of this other stuff about Christianity throughout the rest of the week. And so they may not even think about, they may not even have a thought about stopping to help someone or taking the time to have a spiritual conversation with someone, because that kind of stuff is separate from the life that I have, during the week. During the week, I've got work to do. During the week, I don't have time to really stop and help other people necessarily. I've got other things to do. But listen, if you are a Christian, you are a Christian all the time. You're a Christian all the time. There is no time where you just turn off being a Christian. The Bible says nothing about a Sunday-only Christian. There's no time where you say, you know what, I'm not going to be a Christian today. I'll be one tomorrow, actually. That's not what we read about at all. And that's certainly not the picture that we see in Jesus. Folks, if we're going to model Jesus and learn from Jesus and see that if He has time for people, then we've got time for people. We've got time for people, even with our busy schedules. Okay? Jesus never saw people as an inconvenience. We can't see people like that either. You can't do that either. There's one other thing with this that I think kind of goes together that we learn about Jesus. And that is that Jesus was not inaccessible. He was not inaccessible. Even here in chapter 1 of Mark, what do we see? Well, we see people are coming to Him because of what they see and what they've heard. They come to Him at Simon and Andrew's house to be healed, and the leper approaches Him seeking to be cleansed, seeking to be healed. It would have been very easy, I think, for Jesus to say to those people, sorry, look, not right now. I've kind of got some bigger fish to fry, if you know what I mean. I can't really help you right now. I think that would have been very easy, maybe even a temptation, and I think it is a temptation for us too. Sometimes when people approach us or they want to talk with us about something, aren't we tempted sometimes to say, sorry, not right now. Not right now. I can't. I don't really have time right now, man. Maybe next time I can help you out, but I can't really today. Or maybe we are tempted to ignore the phone call because we just don't have time for that person right now, or we let that text message sit there on blue, which means unread, right, if you have an iPhone, right? Why? Because we just don't have time even to respond to a text message to that person, because why? We're so busy. We're so busy, I don't have time for you. But what we learn about Jesus is that Jesus was not inaccessible. Jesus allowed, really, for open access to get to him, even in his busyness. I mean, it was kind of an open door policy, so to speak. So what do we learn from Jesus then? Well, we learn, very simply, to be accessible. To be accessible. Look, we all have busy lives. We all live busy lives. But if we're going to be like Jesus, oh, to be like thee. Sorry, I keep bringing that up, but that hit spot on with that song just before the sermon. If we're going to be like Jesus, much like we cannot be a closed-off Christian, we can't be inaccessible Christians either. I mean, that so goes against much of what a Christian is supposed to be about. We are supposed to be, you understand this? We are supposed to be the bridge from the lost to the life. We, you, me, Christians, we are the bridge for people. That's what we're supposed to be for people. We can help people, we can help give people what they need for eternal life. And so how could we not be, open and accessible to people that may need us, or to people that may want to have a conversation with us? Okay, now look, understand this too. Understand this. I'm not necessarily saying that we shouldn't guard our time at times. I'm not saying you shouldn't guard your time with family. I'm not saying you shouldn't guard your time when you do have other important things that are going on in your own life. I'm not saying that we should just drop everything all the time just to appease somebody else. I don't think that's not realistic. It's not realistic. Okay, but I do want us to see that being available and accessible is something we see in Jesus. And I think, too, we've got to understand how serious of a thing that it could be if we're not taking time for people, or if we never allow access to people. I mean, just think about it. What if you have a person who is purposefully trying to reach out to you, and you specifically? Maybe they're going through something very hard in their life, whatever it is, but maybe they know that you have actually gone through that. You know what? They're reaching out to you. They need to confide in you. They want to talk to you because they're looking for some help. People have all kinds of voices in their life, right? What if you're like the only sound voice in this person's life? You're the only one. You're like the friend that hasn't dropped them off just yet. You keep that door open and you're still willing to talk to them. You're the only sound voice, and they want to come to you for advice. Are you going to be open for that? What if something is worse? What if in the moment, I don't know, what if they're thinking about harming themselves? It's a possibility. And they need to talk to you now. They need to talk to you. What if they just need physical help? What if they need a ride? What if they need help with some work done even at their house? What if they just want to have a spiritual conversation with you? It doesn't even have to be a spiritual conversation. What if they just want to talk to you? Would you be unavailable, or would you be accessible, just like Jesus was? When you look at Jesus, I think you see that sometimes it's not always about you. It's not always about your time. It's not always about your schedule, your routine. I think you see that you have to have a consideration for others and be open to others and what they need sometimes. I think that's what you see. And so, people are not an inconvenience. They shouldn't be looked at as a threat to your schedule. No, they become a part of your schedule because people are a part of your Christian life. Just like people were a part of Jesus' ministry. And I think that's the way we need to look at that. We learn so much when we look at the life of Jesus. And today we learn two very simple things. We learn not to see people as an inconvenience, even in the busy schedules that we have. And we also learned to make sure that we stay accessible when people need to speak with us. Why? Because we're Christians and we're in the people business. And that's what we do. That's just what we do. That's our life. If you are intrigued about learning more about Jesus, maybe you're interested in starting a relationship with Jesus, I hope that you will consider that. I hope that you will let us here even help you with that. But just know that you cannot really and properly model Jesus unless you're joined to Jesus. You can't really say that you're living the Christian life when you're not really a Christian yet. You've got to understand there is a process to becoming a Christian. There is a process in that. And if you want to know more about that, then let's make some arrangements and let's go have some coffee, because that is the most important discussion that you can have in this life, you becoming a Christian. If you're interested in that, you can let that be known today. And you can come forward now and let it be known as we stand and sing.